but here we are, and it's another day, another injury to talk about, and the 49ers, they got their hands full with this one.
And it was gruesome. It was a gruesome injury. He got rolled up on from behind and blew out the ankle severely, and Jair Brown fell into him, and you saw the Tampa players, man, they were frantically calling for the Niners trainers immediately. Get out here, get out here, get out here. Yeah. So it's nobody's fault. I mean, by the way, if you're if you're the guy who's decided that you're going to crush Jair Brown for this, I mean, come on. I mean, check yourself. I mean, Jair Brown is not responsible for that injury. It's just the way it is, just the way it goes. But I saw some people this morning just being like, Jair Brown. It's like, no, dude, no. Think again. Come up with something new. Go dig. Look for a new blame suspect. Because you can't blame Jair Brown. You play the game fast and physical, and stuff happens, and it wasn't his fault.
Krug, a big theme of our show here today in just kind of processing it all and letting the 49er fans kind of vent and figure out where they go is how much do the expectations for this team change now? Because they're still 4-2, and Fred Warner is the heart and soul and leader of this football team, both, I think, offensively and defensively. Trent Williams said that in the locker room in Tampa after the game. But for you, how do the expectations change? Can the 49ers do anything, looking to the outside organizationally to try and salvage this season? Are they more or less, I guess, apt to make a trade now? Because they are still leading the division, and it's going to be tough to obviously have a defense that plays anywhere close to the standard that the 49ers have set with Fred Warner. They still have what I believe to be a lot of winnable games. Now, you can also lose those games if you don't play well, and especially if you don't have a capable enough defense. But there are a lot of winnable games on the schedule for the 49ers to where I think they can still get to 10 wins and be a playoff team. But how do you see all of that as it relates to the expectations, while also maybe understanding the fact that this team probably can't contend for a Super Bowl anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you are, right? It depends who you are in this equation. If you're, I think the players, this is what you sign up for. You're signing up for 17 weeks, whether it's, whether you're a good team or not, whether you're a playoff team or not. So, I mean, the people that are like, bench everybody, trade everybody, tank the season, it's like, what? They're not doing that. It's just not doing. Even if they should do that, they're not doing that. It's just not the way it's done. The players and coaches sign up for the full 17 weeks, and they're going to play the full 17 weeks. And as far as how does this change things? I mean, in some ways, it shouldn't change anything for the players and the coaches. I mean, what are you not going to work as hard? You're not going to play as hard. You're not going to coach as hard. You're not going to, you're not going to watch film as hard. You're not going to lift weights. I mean, it's just, you're going to do all those things the same way you were going to do them before Fred Warner's injury, before Nick Bosa's injury. So, and to some degree, nothing changes. I think what changes potentially is for John Lynch, and I don't know where you were before, but I was already in the camp of no way, no how should they trade their first-round draft choice. That's earmarked for their replacement for Trent Williams. And I really don't think they ought to trade their second or third-round pick either. Now, that was probably the debate, is would you trade some 2s and 3s? Would you trade some day 2 picks for a Hendrickson or a Simmons or for a real difference maker? I think now that discussion should be off the table. I don't think you should be considering trading day 2 picks. Not when you are in this situation. But it doesn't mean that you should. I mean, there's two kinds of trades in the NFL. There's the trades where it's Herschel Walker, Deshaun Watson, and you trade a ton of capital and, for a player. I think they have to be, if they were ever in that lane, they need to get out of that lane. The lane they need to be in is still in that, hey, you know what? If I can get a player that's useful, that can help us, that can move a day 3 pick, with all the compensatory selections that the Niners have accrued through time. I think I would still be doing that. I'd still be on the lookout for that. And that's like 80 to 90 to 95% of all NFL trades. Look what they traded for Brian Robinson. Hardly anything.
Right.
So I think they're still very much in the trade market on that level. I just don't think I would consider a day 1 or day 2 pick. And then you got to ask yourself, what do they really need? Like, that's the other thing. It's like, it's not just do they need to make a trade? It's like, what exactly do they need? And I would say they need a veteran offensive lineman who can plug in for Connor Colby, that can allow them to bench Colby so that they can run the ball, so that they can achieve offensive balance, so that they can keep their quarterbacks upright, so they can have a chance to compete for playoffs, and who knows what happens then. So I kind of think that the thinking coming into yesterday was, they just need a finisher. They need a pass rusher to finish the deal. Now I think you should look at it differently. I think you should look at it like, what is going to get us playing good football? You're not going to be able to sustain anything if you can't run the ball at all. And right now, their offensive line is horrible. I don't want to hear from anybody who says otherwise. They can't run the ball at all, despite having one of the best backs in football. And their quarterback has been hit 20 times in the last 2 weeks. That is not sustainable. So I don't want to hear about pass rushers. I don't want to hear about linebackers. I don't want to hear about defensive additions. I want to hear about who is the veteran offensive lineman that's going to get them to open some run lanes so they can achieve some balance, so they can keep their quarterbacks upright, so they have a chance. I think they need to change their viewpoint from how do we finish games to how do we start our winning equation, because right now they're dead on arrival with their winning equation. They're a running football team that can't run. They're a team that Kyle Shanahan loves offensive balance. He can't achieve it because they cannot run. So it's 40 passes a game and 10 hits on the quarterback. And unless you really have this strong desire to see Adrian Martinez, I would say that plan sucks.
Talking to Larry Krueger here with a lot of great insight here on a Monday. And, it's funny. So before we had you on, I reopened that discussion that we had on Friday about potential sellers at the trade deadline. And I wanted to get JD's thoughts on some of the teams that we could say, in all certainty, they probably will be sellers. Now, one of them is Cleveland, and I think that the takeaway from the Pittsburgh-Cleveland game yesterday wasn't as much about the Steelers and more so about, the Browns kind of admitted they're punting on this season. So you say veteran offensive lineman. What do you think about the notion of going and getting somebody like a Joel Bitonio? Signed a 3-year deal, $15 million. His contract ends at the end of this year. I don't know if you would only do that if the plans would be to re-sign him after the fact. I get that there's a lot of youth on the offensive line, but they got a lot of linemen on this roster, and a lot of those linemen have been injured at this point already in the year, and it's clear that they're missing them from the get-go.
Yeah, I love that name. I love Bitonio. He played at Nevada. He's a super tough guy. I also like Kevin Zeitler. Zeitler's with Tennessee. He's 6'4", he's 330. He's been a really, really good offensive lineman for a number of years. He's also a culture player. I think they need a little bit of I think they could use a culture player on their offensive line. Somebody who's just like such a maniac that the rest of them have to kind of fall in line. And Zeitler and Bitonio kind of fit that description. They're kind of old school, throwback, tough guys who demand a certain level of intensity. And I would go that direction. I mean, you got to evaluate everybody across the board on that offensive line. You're not getting it done. You have one of the best backs in football, and he's running into walls on most carries. And now you're at a point where Shanahan starts to coach around the failures of his roster. And so now it's like, well, we're not going to have offensive balance. It's going to be 40 passes a game, and it's just not sustainable. So they're going to have to go back to the beginning of football, the only position group on a football team that is impacted by no other position group is the offensive line. That is the area right now where they're just deficient. Trent Williams looks old. Brendel's getting beat. Pooney's regressed significantly. I mean, Dom Pooney, my goodness. When he watches that film yesterday, I want to see Dom Pooney hit a defensive lineman as hard as he hits himself, as hard as he hits the ground after he screws up. Hit the defensive lineman with that intensity, because right now he's regressed significantly.
Krug, give me the likelihood that the 49ers actually look to make a move at the deadline or ahead of the deadline on the offensive line, because as you well know, they tend to evaluate their linemen's performance at a much different rate than you or I or PFF or fans or anybody else. And it was clearly a major problem yesterday. It was a problem in LA in a game that they were able to still win. But historically, the Niners have not looked under Kyle Shanahan toward making those kinds of changes that others continuously call for. What do you think would actually get them into the mode to believe that they have to do something now when they haven't really in the past?
Because their quarterbacks are all beat up. Because their running back, who they love and is a future Hall of Famer, is running into walls. Because they literally can't achieve offensive balance if they can't run the ball. And how many weeks are you going to give the run game? I think, are they going to do something? I think they're going to be active. I really do. I think this doesn't change anything from that perspective. I think they are going to be active in the trade market. And I think if they're realistic with themselves, they're going to say, well, what do we need? You don't need a quarterback. Maybe you could use another runner, but you got Christian and Robinson. You don't really need a tight end. You got Kittle coming back. You've got I think Kendrick Bourne is proof that, you don't really need to trade for a receiver, right? Defensive line would be the area. I think internally they're pretty well prepared with Bethune and Nick Martin to handle life without Warner. But those guys aren't Warner. You know what I mean? So there's that factor as well. Adam Schefter put out a list the other day of all the guys that he thinks are going to be potentially moved at the deadline. And on that list were, some offensive linemen, and Zeitler was on that list, and Betonia was on that list. So I do think that's where they need to go. But you're right. They may not see it the same way, but I'll say this. The Todd Bowles, who's one of the most blitz-heavy guys in football, he didn't blitz yesterday, hardly at all. Why do you think that is? Because he felt like he could get it done with his front four and impact the quarterback without blitzing. And he knows Mac's a good processor, and he knew Mac was going to be able to throw in behind his blitzes. So he said, you know what, this guy's a good processor, and their line isn't any good, so I'll just run my front four at him, and we'll get enough pressure, and we won't give him predefined reads, and we'll win that way. And it worked.
Krug, it was pretty clear what we saw from the defense when Nick Bosa went out. They did not get a quarterback hit against Jacksonville and their only other loss of the season. What did you observe from the defense yesterday as far as Fred Warner going out and just looking a little bit more hesitant, disconnected, disjointed?
Well, I mean, he's the leader. He's the guy that gets he's more important than Bosa in some ways, because Bosa's just about, what he can do. And Warner's about, getting everybody lined up right. So, you take Warner out. He's a great coverage linebacker. He's a difference maker for sure. You're going to look a little disjointed. But let's be totally honest about this. The 49ers were not stopping the run when Fred was out there. Rashad White was running freely in the first quarter. Before Fred went out, he had a 10-yard run on first down. And so they just weren't good enough against the run overall. And what's it going to take? Everybody's going to have to, know the game plan. Everybody's going to have to be really into Fred is not going to be able to cover the failures of the rest of that defense. So, it's going to be really important. I think Bethune stepped in. I thought he made a number of nice hits, but he's not Fred as a coverage guy. I know Nick Martin will help out once he gets healthy. But, it's just you have these difference-making players, and you have a pretty good line, and then you have Nick Bosa. You have a pretty good linebacking core, but you have Fred Warner. Well, now, you don't have those great players, and it takes you down several pegs.
You mentioned a little bit, Krug, as far as Tatum Bethune. What's just kind of your overall evaluation of him as a player and what the 49ers think of him to be, in the position now as Fred's backup to step in? And then also, where do you think this leaves Nick Martin, who's been a healthy scratch here to begin his NFL career through the first 6 games?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's wrong with Nick Martin. Nick Martin's, just in a numbers game. They can only have so many guys up on game day. He's got caught in a numbers game. He's, they have special teams linebackers like Curtis Robinson and Luke Gifford that are special teams aces. They were trying to be good on special teams because they were so bad in previous years. So they're committing to special teams, and that's part of how you commit to it. You sign guys who are good on special teams, and then you make them active on game day. And so that's what they're doing. And Nick is, there's nothing wrong with Nick. He's just not a special teams ace yet. Many great linebackers at the college level aren't special teams aces because they're not asked to play special teams on their college team. So that's the only reason he's not up. But I would expect Bethune is going to be Bethune came out of Florida State. He's got great instincts. He's a really good run defender. He just was a step slow, but he worked on his body in the offseason, and I think he picked up a step and a half of speed. He remade his body, and I think you've seen a faster Tatum Bethune, and I think he'll be pretty good, to be completely honest. But he's not Fred, and he's not that kind of a coverage player. Martin, I think, is now going to be up, and he's going to get some run, and I think you're going to see him develop. He'll have weaknesses, but he's also going to show that he's got star potential because that's what he's got.
How do you think they will look to use Martin? Because Bethune's the mic. I mean, where will they get Martin in the game, you think?
Well, I mean, Bethune, basically everybody moves up a spot. So Bethune moves up a spot into Fred's spot, and then Martin would step into Bethune's spot. So he would.
So he'll be the backup Mike, you think?
He'll be the backup Mike, and he'll be the special team. He'll be a special team contributor, and if there's an injury or somebody needs a blow or whatever, they'll put him in there. But I think Nick Martin's gonna play, and when he does play, I think he's gonna play well. And I'm not losing Fred is a crusher, but it's more of a crusher because of how spectacular Fred is as a coverage guy and what a leader he is in getting everybody lined up. I think they'll be able to replace him physically. It's the mentally and emotionally that's going to be difficult.
Krug, we appreciate you coming by. As always, it's a little bit of a tougher Monday because I was thinking going into the weekend when I had both of you on filling in for Papa the second half of the show, I'm like, hey, if they lose to a Buccaneers team that's played some incredible football to start the season, so be it. But I felt like just watching the last 3 quarters was an entirely different experience once you saw Fred go down and do it in that fashion, man.
It was, the worst football game I've ever seen, I think, was the NFC Championship game, Niners-Eagles, because of the nature of that, right? The game was done 6 plays in before any points were really, before the game was really, before we even settled into the game, it was over, and we still had 3 hours to go. So that was a tough watch for sure. But this was a close second, just because we all know what Fred means to the team and to their emotional place and their swagger on defense. I mean, he's such a special player, such a special person, future Hall of Famer. So it's a real blow. But hey, you know what? This is football, and you got to get up, and you got to keep fighting, and you got to keep driving, and nobody can take their foot off the gas pedal. By the way, very cool that Jim Nance gave a little shout out love to Greg Papa on his on one of the touchdown calls on the CMC 1-yard run. He called it, and then he kind of made reference to Greg there, before they went to the commercial break. Nance was bugging the hell out of me yesterday with his predictions and his jinxes and this and that, but that one moment I did enjoy quite a bit.
Here we go, Jim. Let's talk about Greg Papa. That was a terrible Tony Romo. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, no, that was incredible, and I joked with JD. I'm glad the 49ers got in the end zone because when the morning show was looking for that sound, it wasn't hard to find. Go back to the one touchdown that the 49ers were able to score. But, hey, at least they got Eddie Pinheiro. Eddie Dinero has been money.
Eddie's been money. Now, if somebody could tell Sky Moore that fielding punts inside the 5 is not necessarily, that it's somewhat frowned upon. Maybe we could start there. That'd be a good little spot to start.
Couple games tonight. Couple games tonight. Bills and Falcons. Obviously, the next Niner opponent's the Falcons. But a little bit of breaking news here. Jake Moody will be kicking for the Bears tonight against the Commanders, elevated from the practice squad. So Jake Moody tonight kicking for the Bears. Speaking of special teams.
Wow. Good luck to Jake. I did find it interesting. I think one of the more interesting moments of the week leading into this game with the Bucs was when Eddie Pinheiro told us that he's reached out to Jake Moody to, give him emotional support. And I just thought to myself, man, that is above and beyond the Call of Duty for Eddie Pinheiro. But I wish Jake
Pinheiro's a great guy, man. He's been a delight to talk to in the locker room, and he just seems like a real cool dude who he understands the importance of being a kicker, but he also understands that you can't really take yourself too seriously in an NFL locker room, I think, as a kicker.
Yeah, no, to me, I knew he was the right guy. The very first question and answer when he was like, hey, someone's like, hey, what's your mindset, taking over? And he's like, look, it's the NFL. You make kicks or you're gone. And then he's like, ha, 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 ha. And it's like that was such an eye-opener to me because it was like really what was bothering the Niners was how heavy everything was getting around Jake Moody.
Yeah.
And when you throw in a guy who's like staring at his NFL mortality like Eddie Pinheiro knew, he just laughs in the face of it like, hey, man, if I don't make kicks, I'm out of here and I'm cut and I'm gone. When if you're at that spot, you're in a different spot than where Jake was. And Eddie Pinheiro is one of the MVPs of the season so far.
When he was hobbling around there before halftime, I was like, you got to be kidding me, bro. Anyone who's like playing well for this team immediately is heading into the medical tent. So, Krug, you stay safe yourself. We'll catch you on Niners Nightly. So we got a live Niners Nightly after the Monday night broadcast on the Sports Leader, correct?
Yep, tonight after the Monday night, second game of the doubleheader. I'll take some calls. I'll vent. I'll rant. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do, but we'll talk. I do have some plans for what I think the Niners ought to do and how they ought to react, and we'll throw them out tonight.
We appreciate you warming up with us on a Monday.
Absolutely, fellas. My guys, have a great rest of your Monday.
Thanks, Krug.